Hey guys, it's the Uber Elite, and this is my elemental animator that I currently have at 96.5 on Beyond League. This character is very beneficial to teams. I personally would not suggest this build unless you have a team or some friends that you play with that do endgame maps, because this build works way better in a party than it does solo. If you want to solo a lot more, I would probably recommend Summon Raging Spirits, but as for this, having this spec with people that are playing, say, Wanderers or Bow builds or any of that, this build is extremely strong in not only supporting them, but providing more DPS to the team. This build can solo, however, but it's definitely stronger in teams. So, let's go over the gem setup real quick. This build is based around using Animate Weapon. I currently have a level 21 with 20 quality. Level 20 is fine, you don't need the 21, but the 20 quality is pretty important. Quality is extremely helpful in making sure your minions can keep up and move from monster to monster quickly. Linked with that, we have Melee Splash, which again, the quality is extremely important to have on Melee Splash. This means this spreads the damage out a lot further. We also have Multi-Strike, which makes them hit much faster, obviously. This beats out faster attacks because we already have increased attack speed on the gem itself. So we shouldn't need more increased, we can just multiply that with the multiplier on Multi-Strike. Weapon elemental damage is fairly obvious. This is a multiplier on your elemental damage, and it's pretty huge. We don't really need the quality on this, and it's the same for Multi-Strike. Multi-Strike definitely does not need quality, and you should not bother getting quality on it at all. But weapon elemental damage, you can get quality on it. It will be a slight boost to DPS, but it's not entirely necessary. An increased duration 2020 allows our weapons to last as long as possible, and this is very important. Now, something that changed in the 1.2 patch is more duration was added to the tree. So instead of having 82-second lasting weapons, we now have 99. Also in the chest we have Arctic Armor, which is our main source of damage mitigation because we don't have a lot of armor or evasion. More on the survivability later. So now in this spec, I am using a Dying Breath instead of the old Orm Varax and Shield offhand setup. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because Dying Breath got a change that makes it a lot stronger now. This increases the effect of auras, this increases your minion damage, this increases your effect of curses, and it increases your cast speed, mana, radius of auras, radius of curses. All around, it is an amazing staff for us. At the same point, when I was switching to it, I only lost about 8% block, which is not a big deal to me. So, all in all, it's a great staff, and leads to insane auras. As well as if you are in a party that wants to use another curse other than elemental weakness, you still buff their curses because it doesn't matter who curses, the enemies will have the increased effect of curse on them as long as you're close to them. We have our minion support skills here. We have increased duration linked with Flesh Offering and Val Grace. Flesh Offering you should use from pack to pack. After you kill a pack, you should use it and then move on to the next pack. Because the Flesh Offering lasts so long and it isn't affected by line of sight, it's very helpful. Val Grace is the burst survivability for our minions. We use this when we really need them to survive, and it's a dangerous situation where there's a lot of AoE going off. We also have our EE skill here, our Elemental Equilibrium skill. GMP linked with faster casting and freeze pulse allows us to spread a fire and lightning debuff over a large area. This has changed from the old multi-trap Ice Nova because it applies the equilibrium way faster than before, and it covers a pretty good area. Pretty much, in my opinion, what is more than Ice Nova, and it's a lot faster. In the helmet, we're still using +2 minion gems with Raised Zombie, Faster Attacks, Multi-Strike, and Melee Splash. Again, this is just to have the zombies do a little bit of damage. They're not just there for tankiness, but they do kill some stuff. In the gloves, we have our auras. Now due to the addition of Generosity, I had to switch out some gems to make sure that I could get this in to boost the damage a lot. Generosity gives us a 39% increased effective auras on top of what we have on the tree already. I'm currently leveling a quality one so that I can increase the aura radius, which is actually kind of helpful. This helps make sure our minions can stay in the range of our auras. Obviously, we have Reduced Mana, and then we have Anger and Wrath. We do not put Generosity on Clarity, we only put Reduced Mana on it, which is in the boots. And this is because we obviously need the Clarity, and our minions don't need the Clarity. This allows us to have high mana regen. We have 322.3 right now. Without Clarity, I would only have 152. So, but with the Generosity and the Dying Breath and our current spec, I believe the current amount of aura effectiveness we have on Anger and Wrath is about 106%, which is very insane. We're talking about boosting people that are Wanders and bow builds to the point where they can't run LE Reflect maps safely. So if you're going to run the spec with a group, keep in mind that it can boost elemental damage on some players to an amount which is actually sort of dangerous on LE Reflect maps. Regular LE Reflect is only 14%, but on a map it's 18%, and that does make a big difference. So keep that in mind as well. As I said before, the boots, more utility skills. We have Convocation, now not on the weapon swap. This allows us to hit Convocation much more easily and faster, and we have the Elemental Weakness skill. Now I've really wanted to try out Curse on Hit with the Freeze Pulse, but I haven't been able to figure out a gem setup where the only way I've been able to figure out how to fit a 4-link for it is by putting Clarity in the weapon, but that means that I can't weapon swap efficiently, and when I have zombies die sometimes in a group that shatters, I really do want to be able to weapon swap, and especially when I'm solo as well. So on the weapon swap, I just mostly leveled gems now, but I also have Spell Echo and Desecrate to summon zombies, or to give some corpses for Flesh Offering before doing, say, Vegan or something else. Also leveling a 20 quality Arctic Armor at the moment. When I'm solo, I do not use this setup though. When I'm solo, I have a +2 staff with cast speed, 5 linked, and I use Summon Raging Spirits, linked with Spell Echo, Melee Splash, Multi-Strike, and Faster Casting. This means at the beginning when I don't have weapons, I can go around at the start and use Summon Raging Spirits to kill monsters faster instead of just sitting there waiting for my zombies to kill everything. This actually is proven to be very effective, and it works great because then once I've got about 4 weapons, I can swap back to my regular staff and then use Equilibrium and my Curse, and the weapons will do the job most of the time, unless the start of the map has heavy amounts of AoE, which is the main problem with this build. As for Flask setup, this has also changed. If any of you were following my Invasion Animator, you'll know that I used a Rejuve Totem. This has changed now because of the changes to Flask have made them way better. Currently using a Bubbling Divine Life Flask of Staunching. I chose Bubbling because there's a lot of chaos damage and beyond, and I'll let my HP drop to an amount where a bubbling won't restore me to 100%, but more like 90%, and then I'll hit this because it'll counteract some of the degen, and this has proven to be a little bit more effective than a Seething has, but you can choose a Seething if you want. Either way, I definitely recommend the Bleeding Affix here. Now my number 2 pot has been a very big deal. This has been the reason I've been able to keep a lot of my minions alive. This is a Eternal Life Flask of Animation with the catalyzed prefix. Now, it only heals 2496 and my minions only get 56% of that, but when you combine a lot of the things that I've added to this build, this is actually extremely effective. Because I'm using Belly of the Beast, which gives me increased Flask life recovery rate. I'm using Alchemist, which increases the effect of Flask. I believe this works on overtime Flask and works on the animation affix. And I'm also using Profane Chemistry, which increases the amount that they heal by 60%. Which means that the Eternal Life Flask is giving insane amounts of regen per second. I can actually show this through Righteous Fire by dropping my HP to 1. And you'll see this degen's pretty fast, but if I hit this flask once, it heals insanely fast. So, definitely a great change, in my opinion, and has kept my minions very strong. With the passives, we have 7 zombies right now because of Grave Expectations, Grave Pact, Grave Intentions, and Lord of the Dead. Grave Intentions was one I took way later because my minions started having trouble with chaos damage. But other than that, we have taken out Charisma because we don't need it to keep to have enough mana to cast Animate Weapon. And the amount of aura effectiveness it gives is only 6%. It's only an aura reduction passive for the most part now. In return for getting rid of Charisma, we now have Potency of Will, which has changed from the Invasion patch to an actual skill effect duration, which allows us to have more weapons. This has been a great change, in my opinion. We do have a dex node to make up for some dexterity that I lost when I was switching out my gear. But other than that, a lot of aura reduction. I may get rid of this one if I might not need it, but it is a little bit helpful because when I am spamming Animate Weapon, I do run out of mana. But all around, pretty simple tree to follow. You can run this as a Scion, but you lose 40% mana regen by running it as a Scion, so I kind of recommend Witch. Right now, I'm filling out the life wheel, but if I ever hit 100 with this build, this life wheel should be full. Either that or I'll get some curse effectiveness, but likely to just fill out the life wheel. Now the reason for these two clusters are the most important, in my opinion, to keeping your minions alive. Now, this one gives 16% all res and life regen, and this one gives life leech and some life. The skill effect durations are also very important because the longer your weapons last, the more weapons you'll be able to have up at a time. Other than that, it's really just all life and mana regen or effectiveness for the most part. Very, very simple. Also Eldritch Battery because we don't really need the energy shield at all. We just need the mana. So, yeah. All of that combined makes for an interesting build, so let's run a map. Now, as I said, this build is a little bit more effective when we are in a group, but we can still solo with it. And it isn't the most effective thing in the world, but it works. Now, when I'm in a group, I choose to not run the SRS at the beginning. I just use my offhand to level gems and to be able to refresh my zombies. Because your group should be able to kill stuff just fine. So just cast Arctic Armor and get that off the bar, so that I can have Valgrace here when I swap back. I also forgot to go over the rest of my Flask setup. I'll sort that out afterwards. And that's a Soul Eater rear. I should probably go the other direction because I don't want to feed that some Raging Spirits. You need to be careful with Raging Spirits and Soul Eater because they do eat the souls of Raging Spirits, and they can become very powerful very fast. I got a couple weapons right now. And I've got Comcast lag, which is always fun, and the reason why I haven't been streaming as much lately. Once I hit about 3 or 4 weapons, I find that I don't really need to run the Raging Spirits anymore. I will sometimes identify some blue weapons to speed up the process. There we go, 4 weapons. Now we're running on only the weapons. Now you notice I don't have Flesh Offering until I have, until I switch back to the staff. And it's a little bit unfortunate, but you can actually run Flesh Offering before, before you start using SRS, because even if Flesh Offering is on your weapon swap at the time, when you switch weapons, it'll still take effect. It won't go away. Just kind of interesting. Let me clear out the strong box real quick. You don't have to identify every blue weapon that drops, but it can be useful. There's a bunch of dogs here, and I don't know how much they're going to target while I'm trying to summon stuff. So I hit Valgrace here to make sure they stay alive. Strong boxes with mirrored items can give you a lot of weapons. As you can see, I have 22 right now, which is pretty insane. You can see everything just kind of melts whenever it gets in contact with the weapons. Now, and we'll see how many I have by the time I hit the boss. As you can see, white mobs are just getting two-shot by the weapons right now. And in a party with ranged weapons, you won't feel like you're doing much until you hit those rare mobs, because there's a lot of specs that have way better AoE that cover a way larger area, such as Wander or bow builds. So if you're teaming with a Wander, you actually are doing a ton for them, though. You're giving them some great auras, especially if they have Crown of Eyes. Then it's huge. Nice little gorge. Probably should have run that instead for the video, but I wanted to show it in a 76 map, because I run them anyways to try and get some more 77, 78s right now. You're gonna see the boss here in a second. Just kind of melt. The funny thing about this boss is it can only hit a single weapon at a time. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you can get cases where the boss is. Oh, did I just kill it? I just killed it. Whoops. Okay, well, there's my point. Yeah. With this boss in particular, you have things like this right here, where you just come here, summon your weapons will just float over this and hit right over here where the boss is. And it'll die pretty quickly, but the lightning strike won't be able to hit you. And in cases where you have Beyond Pack spawn with sub-fizz, that boss can really hurt. I've dropped to about 500 HP from my current HP pool before from this boss because of a random sub-fizz aura next to it. And the lightning strike projectiles can't actually hit your minions, only the initial hit can, because they're considered ground projectiles. Kind of interesting about both summon Raging Spirits and weapons that you can do that. Other things that this applies to are things like Spark and in Academy, the tornadoes also count. And this is a lot of AoE damage right here. The the spikes from the porcupines, the chimerals, all of that. So I just hit my Valgrace to make sure they stay alive. And it was a decent pack size, so I'd get a large amount of charges back before it was over. So just clearing the rest of this map now. And you'll see if you watch my Flask usage, you'll see that I regularly hit my 2 Flask even when I'm at full HP, just to make sure that my minions have a good amount of HP on them. I regularly heal them when I feel like they're taking damage or they are going to take damage. I often do it at times where they're not even taking damage in the first place, but I have to keep lookouts on their HP at all times. And the HP bars, although it is pretty hard to see with the HP bars on, it's extremely helpful to be able to do this. Playing this spec actually makes you a lot better at weeding through loot and being able to kind of, although it sounds kind of scumbaggish, it allows you to snipe out rings and amulets a lot faster. It's also kind of funny because you see the low bases that start popping up when you're good enough to recognize all the weapons and melee weapons that you can animate. Like every 3 maps you'll see a level 1 base every so often. Like you'll see a gnarled branch or a rusted sword, and it'll just be white. Oh, we have an Elrion. Elrion's always nice to have every so often. It's a wave-based one, too. Oh god, my mana. It's the energy shield one. Okay. If only I could have 1000 mana regen all the time. That would be amazing. But yeah, as somebody that likes to alch items for profit, it is nice to be able to see those things right away as soon as they drop. Oh wow, courtyard. Talk about really paying out. Also, if you're wondering what that was, that's a new thing from Elrion recently. Spawns like some unique boss. I also like to chance things every so often. So I suppose I have some time to explain my flask now. My Quicksilver is actually a flask of, it's not of adrenaline, because then I'll just outrun my my minions all the time. So there's no point in putting adrenaline on it, so instead I put a warding on it. And this means that from pack to pack, I rarely ever am cursed. And it's great. I also have a warding flask on my last flask, which is a ruby flask. Now the reason I choose a ruby flask for my last one is because the flame blaster is just absurd damage, and so is Igna. Igna and the flame blaster are the 2 exiles that are the hardest to kill on the spec. And a lot of people have problems with them anyways, so it's probably not something to be worried about. Although I have killed both before. It all depends on how many weapons you have and how quickly you can burst them down, and the Valgrace and all of that. Now, my 4th flask is not required, but it will give an extreme boost in burst survivability, which is how this build has survived so far. Rumi's Concoction, instead of giving us tons of armor for our granite flask, which is what I was using before, is a perpetual of iron skin granite, this now gives us block. Now when I use this, I go from 18% chance to block attacks and 0% spell block to 70% chance to block attacks and 24% spell block for 4.8 seconds. Or no, a little bit more than that because Alchemist gives some increased Flask effect duration. Now, this is absolutely great because the block is going to help us a lot more than 11,000 armor, and we still get about 5,000 armor out of it. So that, in my opinion, is the best in slot for this build, for the Granite Flask. Other than that, yeah, it's great spec and really good to play in groups. I've had wanders that will go from that will go over double their normal DPS just by having me around, which is awesome. And yeah, one of the best support specs to play in the game, in my opinion, because you're not dependent on having other people around all the time in order to do maps and level up. So yeah, anyways, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the thread or in YouTube or whatever. I'll more likely see them if you post them in my build guide, or if you watch my stream at twitch.tv/theuberelite. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. Oh, and before I go, let me just show what Val Grace does too. Val Grace gives 59% chance to dodge attacks and 58% chance to dodge spells. Pretty insane. When you combine that with a Rumi's, I'll open just about any box before anybody else because I'll just pop Rumi's, and Val Grace, and I'll be pretty much extremely tanky in comparison to a lot of people. So I do open a lot of boxes. I'll even open freeze ones without any Flask with the of heat affix. So yeah, this is the UberTheGenerous signing off. Peace out.